I would call it macro 2.0, which is basically kind of the meme last cycle was institutions are coming, and they never really came. I mean, around the margins they came. Hedge funds would trade Bitcoin. There's some entities that would do it, but for example, companies didn't really have the guts to follow Michael Saylor into Bitcoin corporate treasury. We didn't see any Bitcoin ETFs, and so this cycle, assuming that some of these Bitcoin ETFs get approved, and again these institutions see another higher high that kind of shakes them out of what they thought Bitcoin was. I think you could have more normalization among institutions and actually have not just narratives about it, but actually allocations.
Bitcoin is trading above $45,000 for the first time in nearly 2 years, as the market gears up for the potential approval of the first spot Bitcoin ETF in the United States. Bitcoin climbed rapidly from a price of $42,000 on January 1, surging more than 6% in the last 24 hours and 170% over the last year, per CoinMarketCap data. Bitcoin is trading higher than any price reached in 2023 and marks a significant new yearly high for the asset just 2 days into 2024. Bitcoin's price performance comes as the market gears up for the SEC to approve one or several of the 14 outstanding applications for a spot Bitcoin ETF product, currently pending a decision with the regulator. The last time Bitcoin traded above $45,000 was nearly 20 months ago on April 5, 2022, when Bitcoin closed the day at $45,241, before descending into an enduring bear market that saw Bitcoin fall as low as $15,600 per TradingView data. According to global macro investor Alden, this is just the beginning, and soon enough no one would be able to deny how sound Bitcoin is as money. She further discusses the future of Bitcoin as it relates to everyday businesses and other industrial activities. As you watch, don't hesitate to hit the like button, subscribe, and drop your comments below. Enjoy.
If you see how traditional pools of capital treat gold over decades, so multiple studies show that if you add a slice of gold to an otherwise stock bond portfolio, the risk-adjusted returns of that portfolio are better. And that's because gold tends to do well in decades where neither stocks nor bonds do particularly well. So the 1970s, the 2000s, for example, it's that non-correlated asset, or it's a differently correlated asset, and having that rebalancing slice in your portfolio was helpful, even though that was not very accepted in traditional pools of capital, even after decades, right? And so there are kind of these things that are on the periphery that they're the whole point is outside money, right? And so even if it's sometimes outside money that's encased in an inside wrapper, there's still kind of skepticism about it. So I think that somewhat tempers it, but I do think you're right that so this past cycle was about macro. I think the next cycle, there's kind of two things I'm kind of looking at. One is I would call it macro 2.0, which is basically kind of the meme last cycle was institutions are coming, and they never really came. I mean, around the margins they came. Hedge funds would trade Bitcoin. There's some entities that would do it, but for example, companies didn't really have the guts to follow Michael Saylor into Bitcoin corporate treasury. We didn't see any Bitcoin ETFs, and so this cycle, assuming that some of these Bitcoin ETFs get approved, and again these institutions see another higher high that kind of shakes them out of what they thought Bitcoin was. I think you could have more normalization among institutions and actually have not just narratives about it, but actually allocations. And so I think that's one. Number two is I think for me the more optimistic one is the rise of these little Bitcoin hubs. And so Bitcoin Beach is an obvious early example, but there's Bitcoin Jungle, there's Bitcoin Lake, there's Bitcoin Acacia. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong. I always see written rather than there's I think 2 years running the Bitcoin Indonesia conference, run by a woman named Dia. There's 2 years running the Africa Bitcoin conference with Frida and others, and they basically these little recurring hubs around the world and in some of the markets where it's most important. That I think is more powerful than even things like the Bitcoin Commons, Bitcoin Park, Real Bedford, PubKey. These kind of locations within developed countries that are kind of these recurring, Bitcoin hubs. I expect over the next cycle, those to reach more critical mass. So this cycle was like the cycle of like those coming into existence, or at least after the initial few, there's been a spread of those. I actually did a podcast with Kathy Wood the other day, and they like track this, and they kind of have like this number of how many of these little hubs that they're noticing, and it's like a crazy number per quarter. Most of them don't reach necessarily the awareness of the ones I mentioned, but there's a lot of these. And if you fast forward 4 years, I expect these to be much bigger and more numerous. And that's in my view one of the healthiest things that occurs. That'd be one of the healthiest types of cycles.
Yeah, I love that.
So that's I think the other half of the coin. It's institutional liquidity. Institutional capital is good because it can add liquidity to the Bitcoin network and take some of the edge off of volatility potentially. Like that kind of rebalancing effect from portfolios and big pools of capital, and widen the ownership to varying degrees. That's healthy for liquidity and volatility. But I think a better thing is the actual self-custodial or community custodial hubs that are popping up. I think that's more important.
Lynn Alden extensively talks about Bitcoin hubs, Bitcoin beaches, Bitcoin parks, and many other Bitcoin-based infrastructures, and how they are the biggest things coming to Bitcoin. She talks about how important these hubs are and believes that the next cycle would see an increase in Bitcoin hubs and infrastructures around the world, which would also ease regulatory concerns about the asset class, coupled with the expectations for an ETF approval. Lynn Alden is very optimistic about the trajectory of Bitcoin this cycle and believes that it is only a matter of time until it is what is left on everyone's lips. Let us now get back into the video as Lynn talks about the Bitcoin hubs and the future of integrating Bitcoin into everyday infrastructure.
There are a lot of people doing the work to kind of argue that Bitcoin is like halal money. Like it's the fiat currency is based on riba. It's based on interest rates. It's based on credit. It's based on things that some interpretations of religions would prohibit, and Bitcoin is more in line with how those places view money. And so I do think that the Middle East in general really could catch on to Bitcoin. I don't know if it'll happen next cycle. I'd like to see it happen, but I do think in general these hubs are going to pop up around the world. What I mentioned before is basically the hubs, Bitcoin hubs spreading around the world, and therefore any technology that empowers them, anything that allows
like
them.
Fediman.
Yeah, exactly. And anything that helps that. So anything that allows communities to set up their own custody, anything that allows them to build their own custody solution, build their own wallets, get liquidity, deal with scaling in a high fee environment. The worst case scenario would be, that all these hubs arise and all their Bitcoins held by Binance or held by custodian XYZ, right? Some gigantic, multi-billion-dollar honeypot outside of their borders, outside of their community. It's much healthier, I think, to distribute that, empower communities as much as possible to be able to hold their own Bitcoin. And so custody is not entirely a Boolean thing of like the person custodies it, or there's two extremes. Like there's you custody it, which it's not extreme, but it's one end of the spectrum is you custody it yourself. The other end is it's all into one gigantic shared honeypot. And then there's the spectrum on there is okay. If some people you want to encourage as much as possible to self custody. If they can hold it, if they can deal with the fees, if they have that long enough time to be able to deal with that. But if you want to have something in the middle, is at least distribute that custody away from these gigantic pools and closer to their own community, ideally in their own community. So I think that's important. I think anything that makes Lightning more solid is good. We'll see what happens with things like soft forks covenants to see if there's other scaling solutions, or even just things don't require forks. Any sort of promising scaling things that just make interacting with Bitcoin easier to do and cheaper to do and more efficient, while preserving as much of the ethos as possible. So it's really about those hubs, and then about empowering those hubs, because Bitcoin has to win not just on its hardness, but on its what is the user experience of someone who comes to Bitcoin. What is it like for them to use the asset? And so I think that it's gotten way better. Like I really liked, for example, the the tap sign or nunchuck combination,
Yeah.
and I'm not an investor in either of those. But that's an example, I think, of a good sweet spot for UX, especially for smaller amounts. And so I'm looking forward to see more of these kind of hybrid solutions that say how can we get UTXOs spread out more? How can we get custody closer, at least closer to the person, and have them kind of experience Bitcoin as it's meant to be.
Market participants are buzzing with anticipation as major asset management firms scramble to secure regulatory approval for the first-ever spot Bitcoin exchange-traded funds, ETFs, in the U.S. Applicants, including BlackRock, VanEck, Valkyrie, Bitwise, Invesco, Fidelity, WisdomTree, and the ARK Invest and 21 Shares joint venture, all submitted revised filings with the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC, on Friday. The first deadline is January 10th for the proposed spot Bitcoin ETF by ARK Invest and 21 Shares. Many people are expecting the securities regulator to approve multiple spot Bitcoin ETFs by that date. Fee structures are also taking shape, with Valkyrie announcing a 0.80% management fee, echoing ARK and 21 Shares' proposed rate. Fidelity, however, aims to undercut the competition with a remarkably low 0.39% fee for its Wise Origin Bitcoin fund. Invesco, meanwhile, offers a 0.59% fee with a 6-month waiver for the first $5 billion in assets. Bitwise said in its filing on Friday that it plans to seed its spot Bitcoin ETF with $200 million, while BlackRock recently revealed a plan to seed its ETF with $10 million on January 3. The world's largest asset manager has named JP Morgan as a lead authorized participant despite the negative stance consistently displayed by JP Morgan CEO Jamie Dimon. Do you think the SEC will approve spot Bitcoin ETFs ahead of the January 10 deadline? Let us know in the comments section below. Also, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Thanks for watching. Hey Savvy Finance enthusiasts, massive shout out for being the heartbeat of Savvy Finance. Your support has been the wind beneath our wings, and we can't express our gratitude enough. Now buckle up because we've got an exclusive deal just for you. Ever wanted a slice of the action? We're offering a golden opportunity to own part of our YouTube channel's potential future revenue. This isn't just an investment, it's an invitation to be a part of our story. Investing means you're not just an investor, you will be a participant in the future of Savvy Finance. No cheesy lines, just a genuine call to embark on this journey together. But wait, there's more. Your mission, should you choose to accept it, become a Savvy ambassador. Share our videos on every platform: Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn. Your shares amplify our visibility, potentially translating to more views and more YouTube revenue. Here's the kicker. If our viewership increases, we would not be just growing financially. We would be making a tangible impact by spreading valuable financial education. Now the icing on the cake. Invest and you'll score exclusive access to our private Savvy Finance Discord. Here you can chat with Savvy Finance, swap ideas with fellow investors, and be at the forefront of exciting developments. Click on the link below to register your Gigastar account. You can also find the link to my offering page in the description below. Get your Gigastar account ready, review the offering details, and let's embark on this thrilling venture together. To the incredible Savvy community, thank you for being the backbone of our success. Your journey is my journey, and together, we're creating waves. Cheers.